Thousands of lives have been saved by organizations that use Fireground search and rescue techniques effectively. Knowing how to locate and remove victims using these strategies can greatly improve operation efficiency and protect you and your colleagues. In this program, you will learn about sizing up Fireground search and rescue incidents, primary search techniques in multi-story buildings, secondary search techniques, and victim removal skills based on elements in NFPA 1670. As the first arriving IC, it is your responsibility to complete a thorough size-up and develop an action plan. You first need to determine the scope and magnitude of the incident. Figure out if you're dealing with a search, rescue, or body recovery. You will also need to consider the rescue time and whether or not relief teams will be needed. Also consider staffing needs, environmental and atmospheric hazards, the integrity and stability of the scene and patients, the urgency level, and if there are salvageable victims. Then make sure you have sufficient resources available for the needs of the incident. If possible, question bystanders or neighbors who are familiar with the structure and occupancy, and keep them nearby in case you need additional information. Should you decide to send in firefighters, assemble teams to perform primary and secondary searches, as well as a rapid intervention group to rescue search teams should they get into trouble. If you can, assign a team member to walk a 360 of the building's exterior to identify entry, search, and escape points. Then create an accountability system before the search or rescue groups enter. Also, make sure 2 emergency medical support groups are on scene, one for treating firefighters and the other for assisting survivors. After all of these factors have been accounted for, you can create and communicate your action plan. The goal of the primary search and rescue team is to quickly locate and remove victims. Each member must be equipped with a minimum of a communication device, a forcible entry tool, and PPE with breathing apparatus. Whenever possible, searchers should extend and be in contact with charged hose lines. A hose line can provide air and direction, as its couplings will indicate which way back to the exit point. As you enter the building, target the most probable location of victims first and work back to the exit point. As you approach each room, communicate to the IC your location, personal accountability report or PAR, and side of the doorway that you're about to enter from. As you enter, mark a slash near the opening of the door at floor level and try to determine the room type and size. If it is a small room, one rescuer can search it while the other waits by the door. If the room is big, both firefighters will need to enter. Crawl with one arm in contact with the walls of the room, extending the handle of your entry tool to feel for victims. Another technique is for each firefighter to hold on to the ends of a tool or use a short rope to efficiently search an area. If you are in a bedroom, search on the top and inside of beds as you feel for victims. Try not to upturn the beds. The occupants may become trapped. As you work, visualize the arrangement of the room and reach up onto objects where victims may be hiding or trying to protect themselves. You also need to create a mental note of the locations of windows and doors. Victims might be using them to avoid smoke, and you may need to use these for emergency exits. Search each room in the same direction so you will consistently know when the space is clear. If no victims are present, give the commander an all clear and status report, and make the appropriate markings as you leave the room. As you move from room to room and down hallways, check for excessive heat and the presence of fire. Communicate your findings to the IC. And continually provide status report updates at regular intervals throughout the operation and upon your exit from the building. Your primary search strategy will be complicated when you operate in a multi-story building, especially when it is out of the range of aerial apparatus. Multi-story fireground search and rescue can require many search teams and sector commanders. Specific strategies apply to multi-story residential buildings and high-rises. First, try to keep the fire contained in the early stages of the incident. You may be able to prevent it from spreading. If this is not possible, send a team to the level above the fire floor for suppression, and a team to the top floor of a residential building or several floors above in a high-rise. Keep in mind, any other floor where smoke has inundated the space should be searched. 2 stairways are required in multi-story buildings. Designate one as an escape route and the other as a location to move and stage equipment. As teams enter multi-story buildings, they should be aware that fire can travel above them in the plenum or cockloft. This may cut off the team's escape route. Even though the operation is greatly complicated by a multiple-story building, each team needs to conduct its search, communicate with command, and maintain awareness of the surroundings. After a primary search has been performed and fire suppression and ventilation operations are complete, a secondary search will need to be conducted. A secondary team emphasizes a thorough search of the affected building. All rooms need to be visually checked for victims and possible areas of rekindling. The secondary search team needs to inspect all sides of all objects and spaces. Team members will also be required to check underneath and sift through materials to identify subjects. Each room needs to be marked using standardized victim and hazard identification marking systems. By nature, a secondary search is very thorough. There should be little doubt anything was missed after the search is complete. When you come across a victim in imminent danger, you'll need to move them quickly to safety. Firefighters are required to perform a number of carries, lifts, and drags to transport victims short distances to prevent fatal injuries. Certain fundamentals apply to all of these techniques. Always use your legs when lifting a victim. Move patients with the help of at least one other rescuer if possible, and try to avoid jostling them. The most effective and frequently used method of moving victims is by dragging them. The incline drag can be effective for moving victims up and down stairs. As is the blanket drag for moving them across a plane. You should also be able to use the fireman's carry with the help of your partner. Multiple rescuers can provide a stable carry using a 3-person lift, as well as the extremities lift. If a patient is seated, 2 or more rescuers can use a chairlift to relocate them. In other cases, you may need to use a backboard to remove the subject from danger. Whatever technique you find most appropriate, the critical element is to quickly remove them to safety where definitive care can be rendered.
So we'll go ahead and set up 2 teams because the size of the building. We'll send in.
In this program, you have learned about sizing up a fireground search and rescue effort, primary search techniques, multi-story building primary search techniques, secondary search methods, and removing victims based on elements of NFPA 1670. Countless lives have been saved by teams who implement fireground search and rescue techniques effectively. Your ability to use these skills will greatly increase building safety in your jurisdiction and reduce hazards to your fellow firefighters.